Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries and welcome to part 2 of our cabinet door building series. In the last video of the series, we discussed how to find your cabinet door dimensions. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to build cabinet doors. This is obviously not a comprehensive video showing you every way in the world to build them, but I'm going to show you 7 basic ways to build a cabinet door using various types of tools. That way you can build one that fits your style, your needs, and the tools that you already have. So grab your dimensions from part 1 and let's dive in. Real quick note. So in the last video, we discussed how to find your door height and width, but we didn't talk about thickness. In this series, when we get to installation, I'm going to be using concealed cabinet hinges, and for these types of hinges, you typically need a door that's 3/4 inches thick. There are some exceptions in some specialty cases, but for the most part, just to keep things simple, we're going to keep it to 3/4 inch, so that's the thickness of the doors we'll be building in the video.
Slab doors are doors that are just a solid slab. They're the easiest to make and require the least amount of tools. To make a slab door, simply cut a piece of 3/4 inch plywood to the size that you want your door. So in this case, the only tools that you need to build this style door is a saw to cut the plywood. Once it's cut to size, you can apply edge banding to the edges, sand, and you've made a cabinet door. Of course, if you don't want to use plywood, you could also glue up a solid wood panel instead. This is the style of cabinet door that I used on my last kitchen, on my shop, and on these cabinets in Sam's shop. This second option is simply the first option, a slab door, only this one is cut from 1/2 inch plywood. You'll still cut it the same overall size that you want your door, but to give it a frame and panel look, I cut to fit and glue 1/4 inch thick lattice trim onto the front flush around the edges. Once this lattice trim is glued on, the door is 3/4 inches thick. Once the trim is glued on the front, you can putty the edges and sand smooth or apply iron-on edge banding to make it look like a solid piece. This will hide the seam between the plywood and the trim.
When you install the lattice trim on a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, you need to make sure that it's at least 1 3/4 inches wide, because when you drill the holes for the concealed hinges, this hole needs to be fully behind the trim, or else you'll drill through the 1/2 inch plywood and you'll end up coming out the other side on the edge here.
For this cabinet door, you'll need some 1x material for the frame and 1/2 inch plywood for the middle panel. Usually, I like to use 1x3s for the door frame, but you can use other sizes. Just make sure that whatever you're using is at least 1 3/4 inches wide. For this style door, you'll need a saw to cut the boards and the plywood, plus a drill and a pocket hole jig. To make this door, I cut 2 pieces of my 1x material to the overall height I want my door. These will be the stiles. Then I need to cut 2 more pieces, 2 times my board width shorter than I want my overall door width. These will be the rails. A 1x3 is a nominal dimension. They're actually 3/4 inches by 2.5 inches. So as an example, if I'm making a 12 inch by 24 inch door using 1x3s, I'll cut 2 pieces 24 inches long and 2 pieces 7 inches long to make the frame. That way, when they're all put together, the overall size is 12 by 24. Now I need to cut a 1/4 inch plywood panel to fit inside the opening. In this same door example, that means that the center panel should be 7 inches by 19 inches. Once the pieces are cut, it's time to assemble. I'll drill 3/4 inch pocket holes into the ends of the rails and 1/2 inch pocket holes around the edges of the panel. Keep in mind that since these are different material thicknesses, you'll need to adjust when drilling these holes. Then I can assemble with pocket hole screws. I'm using 1 1/4 inch long pocket hole screws in the 3/4 inch material for the frame, and 1-inch long pocket hole screws in the 1/2-inch material for the panel. I install the panel flush to the back side of the frame so that when you flip it over on the front, the panel is inset from the front edge. This makes a really nice door on the front side, but it's not so pretty on the back. To hide the pocket holes, you can putty, plug, or fill them, then sand smooth. For this cabinet door option, you'll need some 1x material for the frame, just like in the last door, and you'll need either 1/4 or 1/2-inch plywood for the middle panel. As far as tools, for this design, you'll need a saw to cut the boards and plywood, but instead of using pocket holes, I'm going to use a dowel jig, a router, and a chisel to make the frame and panel door. I cut my frame pieces exactly like the last example, but I didn't cut the plywood just yet. I used a dowel jig to drill holes to glue up this frame using dowel pins. Now, you could certainly use pocket holes for assembling this frame instead of dowels, but since I'm going to route along the backside, I'm always a little paranoid about using screws because I don't want to hit one with the router bit. Once the frame is glued up, I usually like to sand it down just to get rid of all the glue squeeze out first. Then I flip the frame upside down and use a 3/8-inch rabbiting bit in my router to route along the inside. Usually I'll make a few passes going a little deeper each time until I cut about a 1/2 inch deep. Because the router leaves rounded corners, I like to use a chisel to chisel the corners square on the backside. Then I cut a plywood panel to fit into the opening. You can use either a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch plywood for this. If I'm making drawer fronts, I'll use a 1/2 inch, that way I have more to screw into when I attach the front. But usually for doors, I'll use a 1/4 inch thick material. I apply wood glue into the rabbets and glue the panel into the frame until dry. This also makes a really nice door on the front side, but sometimes the back might not be super clean. Before painting, I always make sure to caulk around the front and the back between the panel and the frame. This will make both sides look really clean. This is also how I make glass door cabinets, except I only route as deep as the glass is thick. Then I can use these turn tabs to hold them in place. For this cabinet door, you'll need some 1x material for the frame, just like the last two examples, and 1/4 inch plywood for the middle panel. As for tools, you'll need a miter saw, a table saw, a drill, and a dowel jig. A router is also optional, but not required. I don't see a lot of people making cabinet doors like this, and I guess it's because mitered corners are kind of a pain. But the reason I like to do them sometimes is because you don't have to be as precise with your dado cuts. To make these doors, first I run my 1x3s that I'll use for the frame through the table saw to cut a 1/4 inch dado. Now you can use a dado blade, but I'm actually just using a regular general purpose blade. I adjusted the blade 3/8 inches high and about a 1/4 inch from the fence. Run the board through, then I flip it around and run it through again. Then I can just adjust back a little to clean out the middle. Now I've basically cut a 1/4 inch dado out of the middle of my board, about 3/8 inches deep. This will be where my door panel will go. Once the dado is cut, this part is completely optional, but sometimes I like to use the router to cut a decorative edge just above the dado. Then I can cut this board down with 45-degree mitered ends. I'll need 2 pieces cut to the height I want my door, and 2 pieces cut to the width I want my door. Make sure the dados all face the inside as you cut your miters. Once the frame pieces are cut down, I can cut a 1/4-inch plywood panel to fit inside the dados. I test fit the pieces to make sure everything goes together well. Then I assembled the frame using dowel pins and wood glue, making sure to install the middle panel before adding the 4th side of the door frame. Once the glue is dry, I sand the joints nice and smooth, and this makes a really nice door on both the front and the back side. This door option is exactly the same as the last one, but I have a cheat to save you a bunch of time cutting down dados and routing edges. If you use tongue and groove lumber, it's already got a pre-cut dado and often a chamfered edge. So sometimes I like to rip 2.5 inches off the groove side of the board and use this for my 1x3 frame pieces. I can simply cut this down with mitered ends and assemble exactly like the last door example using dowels and glue and installing a 1/4-inch plywood panel into the grooves. I use this method when building my bathroom vanity and my hallway closet built-in. It works really well and it saves a lot of time cutting dados. You still need a table saw to rip the tongue and groove boards down, but you can skip the router. This last cabinet door option is what I used on my recent cabinet build, and a lot of you had some questions about it. For this door style, you'll need 1x boards for the frame and 1/4-inch plywood for the panel. As far as tools, you'll need a saw to cut the boards and the plywood, a table saw, and a router. First, I cut down my 1x3s to make my door frame. I need 2 pieces the height I want my door. These will be the stiles. Then I need 2 pieces 2 times my board width shorter than the overall width I want my door, plus 3/4 inches for the rails. Why am I adding that extra 3/4 inches? Because I'm going to be cutting a 3/8 inch long tongue on each end to go into the groove on the stiles. So I need that extra length for the 2 tongues. There are a million other ways to do this. You could do it on the router table. You could even skip the router altogether and just do it on the table saw. But I lined all my rails up together on the workbench and clamped them tight. Then I clamped 2 scrap blocks on each side. They need to be all flush along the ends. I made sure the pieces were nice and tight and not moving. Then I used a 3/8 inch rabbiting bit in my router and cut along the ends of these pieces. I cut this rabbet a 1/4 inch deep. Once one side was cut, I flipped the pieces over and repeated on the other side. That way, I cut a 1/4 inch off each side, so I ended up having a 1/4 inch wide tongue that was 3/8 inches long. Now I needed to cut the dados. Since the tongue was 3/8 inches long, I adjusted my blade height to 3/8 inches and set my fence so that it would cut just along the edge of the tongue. I cut one rail and one stile first, running them through once, then flipping them around and running the other side against the fence. Before cutting all of them, I tested that my tongue fit in the groove nice and tight. Once I was confident in my fit, I cut dados in all of my door pieces. Then I cut a 1/4 inch plywood panel to fit into the dados and assembled using wood glue. Once the glue is dry, I sanded the joints nice and smooth, and this makes a really nice door on both the front and the back sides.
So now we've built 7 different cabinet doors. I'm curious to know which one is your favorite method. I have my own thoughts about it, but I want to know yours, so let me know in the comments below. In the next video of the series, I'm going to go into more detail about hinges and how to choose the right one, how to install them, how to adjust them, some troubleshooting tips, and also a couple of finishing tips as well. So if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that video. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, friends, happy building.